standing with John Shepherd, stained glass artist. We're at his studio, and he is going to explain some of the goings-on with my mom's windows we're having done in her memory at the library. We've commissioned John to do this for us.
Well, basically where we started was with two ideas. We were going to do two windows, one of Little Red Riding Hood and one of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. So Stephanie furnished me with several different illustrations from different books, and we discussed what we liked about some of them and maybe what we didn't. And so through that conversation, I worked up these two designs.
Which I fell in love with.
This one showing the Three Bears discovering Goldilocks in the baby bear's bed. And then this one over here, Red Riding Hood walking down the path, and we see the entrance of the wolf off to the side here. And so basically, once these designs were approved, we decided we were going to do them in painted stained glass, which you could see from this drawing there's some shading on the watercolor, and that's to represent where some of the paint is. And if I turn the page, you'll see here there's no shading on this design.
And the reason that I decided to pick those was because I thought it most represented illustrations in a piece of literature.
Right. And so from that point, and once we decided on the size, these drawings are enlarged to full size. And here we see underneath this tray what one of the full-size drawings looks like once it's created. This one is of Little Red Riding Hood, and what you're basically seeing is the line represents the space between each colored piece of glass, and it represents the heart of the lead once the window's leaded together. And every single piece has a number. Once that's created, a large piece of carbon paper is placed underneath the drawing, and thank you, and some brown paper. And the whole drawing is traced over, complete with the numbers. And so you end up with this same drawing on this piece of brown paper. And then I go through and I look at the design and figure out which color goes where, and I actually mark the patterns, which you could see a little pile of patterns here. You could see they have a rubber stamp. All the ones marked B are for this window, and all the ones marked A are for that window. So then I know that some of these are for one window and some are for the other as I'm cutting them out. They all have the carbon copy piece number. And then the little initials you see here, like DG, that stands for dark green. Or on this it says red.
John, show how your scissors work.
Okay.
It's pretty fascinating.
Once this piece of paper has this design on it, you go through, and so all these lines would be on the brown paper. You go through with these special pattern shears, and you cut the paper. And what that actually does is there's two blades in these scissors. It eliminates 1/16 of an inch from the paper.
Look at the blades on the scissors.
And that's because later, when the window's being built, you need to have this missing space because the lead actually receives each piece of glass that way when it's built. And we'll show that at when it's time for that phase.
I have a question, John. Are there ever scissors that have a wider?
Yes, there are different sizes. This is basically the spacer, and then there's two pieces down below it. So example, some people might be building a copper foil window, which means you're not letting it together. You're going to be wrapping copper around each piece of glass and then soldering it together that way. There's actually a much skinnier piece that goes in the scissors for that because there's less space taken up. So once all that's done, I usually grab some scrap. In this case, I grabbed some scrap pieces of plexiglass and just laid them on top of the drawing. So as I'm cutting it out, I could just lay all the pieces out. Over here in the window, you see the color palette for the job that we picked, and a little fly that's waking up in the winter. So in this case, you see that there's one sample for the red. However, the red actually goes from thin to thick and has dark areas and light areas. So even though we're going to be using shading to show depth in the final piece, one thing we could do, for example, this piece of fabric would be visually behind this one. So I've actually chosen a much darker red for that. And that's sort of a way to begin rendering the job into a more three-dimensional look even before the paint is used.
And this is the first time I'm seeing the actual, I picked John brought in the samples, we went through and he showed me and I was delighted, but when we walked in the studio and I actually saw the large pieces of glass, what a difference from the little samples that you showed me.
Yeah.
In particular, talk about the light and dark that you were doing with this.
Well, one of the glasses we picked was this blue here, and that's going to be for the sky outside this window and for the sky way back here. But the glass actually shades. This glass is mouth-blown sheet glass, and it's made in Germany. It actually comes about 2 foot by 3 foot. And it begins by them blowing a large bubble and elongating it and cutting the two ends off. And then they slice it back down and stick it back into the fire. And the cylinder sort of unfolds itself. And that's how you get all these bubbles. There's little bubbles in here. Here's a big one. And then they hand apply some of the blue coloring onto clear glass. That's why you're getting a few little places where it's more clear. But this piece goes from dark to light. And so based on the design, I wanted the sky to be darker at the top and go light to the bottom. So I actually took the piece of glass and laid it right on the full-size drawing and taped the patterns. Normally I don't have to tape the patterns to the glass, but I wanted the glass to unfold the same way in the window as it did just by holding it up. So what I can show you is glass cutting, because that's really the next step. So in this case, now there are bubbles in here, and sometimes I don't want a bubble to be right on the edge of a piece of glass because it'll break irregularly. So in this case, I might choose to cut this piece of glass there. That way I can cut it here and then cut that one little piece out. There were a couple pieces that were so tiny, here's the little patterns, that it's almost impossible to hang on to the pattern or to tape it to the glass. So what I did is I just traced some black marker to represent the piece, and basically I cut to the inside of the black line.
Oh my gosh.
And I know those seem very tiny, but they actually do show up when the window's built as a little sliver of blue. So.
Well, when I introduced you as a stained glass artist, it certainly is showing now.
And basically, you're putting the glass cutter right up next to the paper, which is why I use a stiff brown paper.
So that doesn't actually go all the way through, it just...
No, a glass cutter has diamond dust, basically, on the little wheel. And what it does is it disrupts the surface of the glass. It breaks the tension of the surface of the glass. And so because of that, so it doesn't cut all the way through. And then since you broke the tension on this side, you actually have to pull the two pieces this way to get it to break where you want. And there are occasions where it doesn't really want to do what you're asking it to do, especially on some ripple glass. So in this case, I might just take all these pieces. Now obviously these are kind of easy shapes to cut out.
Easy for you to say.
Well, versus some of the curved pieces. I'll show you a curved piece also. So that piece is cut and I know exactly where it goes. Well, that's what we were going to do with the blue. What I can show you is some of these dark green pieces in this rug down here are sitting right here, and this is the glass I have for it. So in this case, because I don't need to use shading, what I do is I try to lay out the patterns to create the least amount of scrap. Or a better way of saying it is to have the largest piece left over when I'm done.
Because he was showing us, he does have a file cabinet where he keeps all his little scraps. And when he needs a little piece, he goes to that file cabinet first.
That is correct.
So the glass that's hand blown in Germany, you actually order it from Germany,
Well,
or from a company
there's
that
one
imports it?
distributor in the United States, in New Jersey, that offers that glass.
Oh, wow.
From what I'm aware of, that's the only distributor to get it through.
And how is it packed? Is it shipped by
Well,
air,
they
or-
have huge shipping containers where they have an ongoing order. This is based on what I guess they've told me. So each time they continue to call the company, like if I placed an order, they would call the company in Germany, place that order, and they would put it in their shipping bin, but the shipping bin doesn't leave Germany
Till
until
it's
it's full. And I know that because this blue glass was actually, I had to order 20-some sheets of it, and the distributor only had 3, and I couldn't wait for the ship, literally the ship to come over, so I had to have the blue glass air freighted. And I was quite shocked. It showed up in a wooden crate, minimally packed with strategically packed with styrofoam. Not one of those 22 sheets was broken.
You're kidding,
No.
because I was wondering how much
So,
breakage there is in like shipment like
well,
that.
yeah, sometimes there's breakage, but I was quite amazed.
Yeah.
So what I'll probably, what you're seeing over here that I'm cutting on, this is a cutting surface. Basically, it looks like a screen to a fluorescent light tube, except there's a bottom to it. And the reason for that is little shards are created as you're cutting glass. And if you were just cutting on a flat surface, when you went to lay the sheet of glass down to make another cut, just a small shard of glass underneath could cause you to break your sheet where you don't want to. So this way, the little shards all fall down in here. So for this piece here, I'm going to cut it at a slight arc because I know that'll break off. And then an inside cut is one of the harder cuts to make. So what you do is you start with following that all around. But see, this will actually not break off. It's going to want to come over here and come over there just because you're asking too much of the scored glass to break off. So you start, again, right at the same starting point, but then you don't go all the way into the circle, but then you end almost at the same ending point. So it's kind of like creating a bunch of little crescents. I guess would be a good way to say it. And then when you want to go to break it off, these little notches in a glass cutter are for nibbling off the glass. So you're just sort of sneaking up to where the cut actually is that you want by only asking the glass to break off in little slivers.
Huh.
So now when I get up to the end, I might grab these grozing pliers just to make sure I'm getting a good grip. And sometimes the glass, you know, you could be trying to cut a really complex curved shape and you can break the whole thing after all that work. But I learned a long time ago to not worry about that because it's glass. So if you're going to work in glass, you have to prepare to break the medium and to cut your fingers. So you can see I got most of the end.
Yeah.
I still need to just... I've never been filmed doing this, so I'm trying to figure out where to put my hand so you can
You're doing
film.
good.
Now normally I would have done this over a trash bin so that these huge shards wouldn't be here. But once I know I've got the hard cut made, I just line the drawing or the pattern back up with that curve. And then in sequential order, I make a cut here, here, still holding the pattern exactly in the same spot. Now on an outside curve, you don't need to do all those curved cuts. There. And there, and then you break them off in the same order because this one doesn't have a line that goes all the way through. It can only be broken off once that piece is gone. So, and then usually the bottom edge is razor sharp, so I take the grozing pliers and scrape it like that, just so I don't later get my hand cut. And here you see a bit of a irregular edge, so you could take the grazing pliers and kind of clean that up. But all the edges on this since this is not a copper foil window, all the edges are kind of tucked in under the lead, so.
Yeah.
And,
So, yeah, that kind of hides even if.
yeah, and then the panel gets cemented, so then you see that dark green, which is in the rug. I don't know if I held that up too fast. Sometimes colors don't translate when they're being filmed as they are in real life. So I would just take this piece and set it where it goes and then set the pattern in the pile of done patterns. So that's where we're at so far, and I think the next time we meet I will be showing, all the glass will be cut and I'll be showing how the paint is applied. It's fired in a kiln and it's permanently fused to the glass. And that's that. Can you think of anything else I left out?
No, but I have to tell you, when I walked in and saw the red on the Little Red Riding Hood, the colors are just so vibrant, and I'm just so excited, and I can't wait to see the next step. This is just so fascinating to me. Like I think I told you, I've always thought, you know, maybe when I retire, I might get into doing a little stained glass. So.
Well, yeah, I think it's definitely something. I mean, I could see why people are drawn to it and why you would,
it's so
you know.
gorgeous. It's such a gorgeous medium, and thank you very much for letting us come to your studio and filming, and we'll be back again.
Okay.
All right. Well, it's been a couple of weeks. I'm back with John Sheffer at Glass Factor, and he has done amazing work. I can't believe how much work you've gotten done. And we're going to see a process now called
matting and rendering.
Matting and rendering.
Which are two of the painting steps.
And I'm just so excited. We were talking last time about the blue and how you wanted the darker at the top and come into the lighter and the swirls, and it's just beautiful. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. And what we're basically looking at here are all the pieces that have been cut. They're sitting on a piece of white plexiglass in the arrangement that they're going to be in when they're leaded together. And where you see black painted lines, those have already been painted on and fired. Those are called trace lines. They're just the first step in the painting process. And here I'll put the light under this one so you could sort of see. Maybe I'll slide this back. My light table's not quite big enough for both of these windows. So that gives you an idea of all the different colors. However, none of the colors have been matted or rendered, so there's still no real depth to the window. You're just seeing like the black lines that were painted on the rug, on the comforter, the curls in Goldilocks' hair, and a few little lines in the wolf. Some of the grass lines, which even now the grass lines look quite cartoonish. But that's just the initial step. Once other paint is applied on it, it becomes more three-dimensional and has a much more realistic look to it. So that's that. Now the part of this drawing that's missing are the floorboards that were on that are in the scene, and I've actually got those over there, and I'm going to show you how those get rendered. But I think the first thing I'll show you is how the matte is applied to the glass. So maybe what I'll do is take all the little pieces of this little baby bear, and we'll take all those over to the light box, and I'll show you how the paint is put on. Alright, so what we're looking at here is a piece of glass with the paint on it. Now this paint actually comes in a powder form, specially formulated to be fired in a kiln, which fuses it to the glass. And so it's been sitting here for a few minutes, so it's starting to dry out. There's also a little bit of gum arabic, which is also in powder form. That's added to the paint. And that's so when the paint dries onto the glass, if you just bump it a little, you won't bump the paint right off, but you actually have to work a little harder to get the paint to come off. So the goal here is to apply an even layer of darkness across the entire piece, which will then, once it's dry, be pulled off. So I do that, then I take this blending brush and just drag it across the top plane of the glass, and thereby evening everything out. And then I carefully just slide that piece to the side. Now some of the paint already went underneath and it's on the back side, but I'll clean that off later. And then I just clean off my area, any wet paint on the blender, and bring another piece over.
So you're going to kind of do what is, I would say, is like reverse painting.
Correct. You're basically putting, although this is a really dark brown, you're basically covering the glass in that. And then once it's dry, you're scraping it off to reveal the color of the glass. And that's known as painted stained glass.
There was a whole article in the mini pages last week on stained glass.
Oh, really?
In the Star Beacon, yeah. I took it and laminated it. I was very excited. I thought, oh, how timely, how wonderful it's happening at the same time.
And although it is true we are reverse painting, technically from an artist standpoint, it doesn't feel like that, because when you take the dry paintbrush, for example, and start pulling it across the glass, you reveal the color of the glass, so it actually feels like you're putting the color on top of black, rather than the, so, and that's what's really nice about painted glass. There are so many artists and so many styles that so many artists work in. You know, really any artist could figure out a way to apply their particular type of art that they like to do to glass, and find a way to do it in stained glass. So you can have very modern, very abstract, very stylized, or you know, you could have something in the very traditional sense like a lot of the churches do. Although I've seen some very abstract painted stained glass in churches. Now that one feels a little bit light, so I'm going to come back and get a little more paint. Sort of put a lot on that one.
How many hours do you think you have in what you've done so far in this project?
I actually do not know that.
Just curious.
Meaning I'm sure I have kept track of it, but I have not added all those numbers together to know the answer right now.
Because it looks like it's an awful lot of time. I can't believe.
Well, it's definitely nothing that, you know, there's no shortcuts in stained glass. There's no way to make it take any less time than it takes. So. Here you can see I'm almost sort of just dolloping the paint on. And I've already flung one of these pieces right off the light bench trying to blend the paint because the glass is so light.
Light and small.
You know, if I didn't blend this out, we would have thick parts to the paint and thin parts, and when I tried to scrape off the paint, it would scrape off really unevenly. So that's usually how that's done. I usually take a little section of the window, like in this case, we took all the pieces to the baby bear.
And that's called matting.
Matting,
Yeah.
right. And then what I'm going to do, so that I can show the next step on the light table, is just pull these pieces off.
Oh, that dries rather quickly. It's starting to dry.
Yeah, it is starting to dry, but yeah, sometimes it takes a little bit of time. Okay, I'm going to move this stuff off. Some paints have much more than others. In fact, I could show you these samples before we get back on camera. See, this particular brown needed a lot more grinding. That one too, but this is actually the brown we're using. This is brown, which is because it has a nice dark quality to it. So, okay. So here we are. I've got these floorboards that are in the design of the Goldilocks and the Three Bears windows, and they're actually taped down onto the drawing on the back side. And I've got some different tools here. It's a little hard to see here, but there's a perspective in the drawing, so the floorboards are going this way. This piece right here goes about like that, that one goes like that, and that one goes like that. Now I know that up front from having designed it. So I might start, because I haven't yet rendered this paint, and each time you add the gum arabic, you sort of have to guess at how much to put in as to how hard it's going to be to scrape the paint off. So I'm going to start with this little piece of the floorboard that I know goes this direction, and I'm just going to lightly pull over it, which I don't see any extra lights coming through, so I don't think I really did much of anything. So I might take a bit of a stiffer brush. And still, I see it needs a little more aggressive behavior. I think what I'm going to do, then to start, since what I'm trying to create is a wood grain, there's already the wood grain that's painted on, now I'm trying to create a more of a wood grain. I've got this little tool full of all these little pins, which I know will scrape the paint immediately off, so I have to be very careful to just go in the direction. And I can, you know, it doesn't have to be a perfect straight line because it is a wood grain. I could start just by adding a wood grain like that. Is that picking up on the camera?
Can you see the light coming through?
Now what this is basically doing is breaking through the surface tension of the paint, which when I tried to do that with the paintbrush, it wasn't very successful. So this is just the initial design I would put on. Normally I might start right here in the middle, and I think I'm going to be a little more wavy with it now, just so it's not so mechanical looking, and I might fade it in and out.
Is that a tool you created?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes, and I probably created it for wood graining in the past, which comes up every now and again. And here you see because I got more area to work with, I'm leaving some areas a little darker. Alright, so basically I scraped some more of the wood grain in with this tool, but I still haven't really created any depth. All I've done is add more of a texture of wood. For example, where the floorboards go underneath the bed, you would expect that those would be darker. There's no light hitting them. So I would be apt not to pull any more paint off there, but to pull more off out here where the light's hitting it. So you can see as I'm coming up closer to where this little floorboards go into the bed, I'm not pulling as much paint off. And then another little trick I might do to make the floorboards look, And then over here where it's really way behind the Papa Bear and way back in the background, I'm probably just not going to do anything there to keep that nice and dark. But one little trick I might do to make these floorboards individually look more like the light's hitting sort of the little edges of them is I might come along with this real stiff brush right on the edge of this piece and scrape off a whole bunch of paint like the light's hitting it. And then I might do it a little bit on that one. A little bit on, just a little bit on that one. That one. And that one. And then another trick would be if the light were coming through this window, and of course it's not a direct light, it might also be hitting the top of each board, so I might just take this and go this way. I'm only going to do it a little on that one because it's in the back. A little more on this one. And that just sort of really tells your eye that these are all separate little boards. These three pieces are also very much in the background, so I'm going to leave them dark. That's just one of the tricks, is anything that you're really trying to push into the background, you just don't render it too much and leave a lot of paint on it. And in fact, once everything's painted and fired, if I still think something's too light, I might add some more paint to it and put it back in the kiln. So now normally I would take these and put them on the kiln shelf and put them in the kiln, but I think for right now, since this is being filmed, what I would do is just take these and lay them back onto the plexiglass so you can see how they're actually acting within the framework of the window. Is that turning out on the camera? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Part of Papa's little tiny foot is there. Just a little.
Well, sometimes there's those little tiny pieces of glass, like that little his other little foot that you could see underneath the bed. Sometimes just those little extra things really make a window look, you know, rather than leaving it out, it makes the window much more three-dimensional, much more realistic. So if you can sort of imagine what we've just done for these few pieces, which in this case are floorboards, this is going to be done to every single piece in both windows. Like where Goldilocks' hair is, when I go to do that, I'm obviously going to use another entirely different technique to pull the paint off in order to accentuate her curls. The same with the bears, I would pull it off, and the wolf, I would pull it off more in the direction of the way fur would look in order to accentuate that idea. You can see I'm still trying to be careful with the painted glass because I could still knock some of the paint off because it hasn't been fired on yet.
Now the next step is to put it into the kiln, correct? And
Correct.
to fire it?
Yes. And this kiln here actually has 3 shelves, and you can see how they're stacked in there. And that's only because my bottom element has burned out, otherwise I would use more shelves. But everybody has their own kiln. And depending on each paint, I have to do test firings. So I already know that the trace and the matte, I have this set at, I believe it's at 1210 or 1220. And I can show you that when I turn this on, I'll shut it off in a minute, but when I turn it on, it goes through a little test pattern. Then it goes blank. And now it's set at 1210 degrees. And you know, if I don't shut it off, this kiln will go up to 1210 or thereabouts. Sometimes it usually goes a few degrees over, and then it shuts itself off.
And how long would you have to fire these pieces in order for them to be cured?
Well, they only get, each time you add paint, you need to fire it again.
Oh, wow.
So like these pieces that have the black lines have already been in the kiln. Now you see that I'm adding this on. Those will get fired again. If I feel I need to add more shadow, like where these are under the bed, I might add some more paint and fire them again. So.
And how long are they in there each time they're fired approximately?
It takes about, I have to guess at that because I haven't timed how long. I want to say maybe 4 or 5 hours it takes to get up to 1210 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
And then it shuts itself off, but you leave it closed and I won't reopen it until the next day so that the temperature can just slowly come back down.
Oh, I didn't realize it took that long for it to come up to that
Well,
temperature.
there's all different kinds of kilns. Some
Yeah.
are much quicker.
Yeah.
And right now you can see the temperature is
Yeah.
78, which a second ago was probably the temperature that's in here, which
Yeah.
is a little colder. I'm going to shut that off.
Well, hi, we're back here with John Sheffer at his studio, and he is putting some of the finishing components to the glass that he's making for the Conneaut Public Library. And what are you doing today, John?
Well, right now I have the Goldilocks and the Three Bears window on the workbench. Here you can see all the loose pieces. They've all been painted and fired, and they're all ready to be built into the window now. And this is actually the glazing. This is building the window. And that's where you're actually laying down all the glass and the lead where it's going to go. And you see all these nails. The nails are actually sort of pinning it all into place, and the whole panel is built sort of pinned into place, and then you go back in and you flux all the solder joints where you're going to solder it, which I'll also demonstrate even though we're not going to finish the panel here right now. And that actually is what connects all the pieces of lead together, and then once the whole front is soldered, the panel's turned over carefully and the back side is soldered. So right now I'm going to give a demonstration of how it is that this is put together. Basically you build it sort of in a corner and work your way up. You have to just sort of decide based on the drawing what the next logical piece to put in is. So for example, I wouldn't be putting in this shape right here yet, which is the head of the mama bear, because by doing that, that would make it too difficult to get all these pieces in. So right now I'm over here, and what I'm basically doing is the lead is shaped like a small I-beam. I don't know if you can focus in on that. And that holds the glass in on each side. So I place the lead in up next to the one piece of glass, and I cut it just a little short, knowing that the other piece of lead that's going to wrap around here is also going to wrap around this edge. So I mark the lead, I pull it away, and then I just take my glazing knife and I cut down through it, and I lay that in, and I take the next piece of glass and lay that in, and this is a little piece of plastic, because I don't want to just smash my tool against the glass, I can break it. So I set this piece of plastic here and just sort of knock it to make sure I'm building this window very tight. Then what I do is take little scrap pieces of lead and stick them along the edge of the glass and put a nail there, and that holds the piece in place. So then the next piece of lead I would do has some curves in it, and right at the very end it's got a curve, so if I just lay this piece of lead in, it will be too hard to bend it. So I'm going to give it a little curve first, hold it up over top of where I'm going to do it, and I actually see that the edge is already cut the correct angle. Now I'm going to overbend it out of the way, stick this piece of lead up, take a nail. Now I'm holding that in place, and what I do is I overbend the lead so that when I set it in, it really gets way down into the curve that I'm trying to get it into. Now here there's going to be another piece of glass with another separate piece of lead, so I know that this piece actually ends right there. And I pull it away, and I could still leave it nailed in here. I'm not going to be able to show you me cutting the lead because my hand's in the way. And then I just stick that back into place. And now I'm going to take this piece, and I was thinking I might have a little trouble getting that in because of the baby bear's head already being in place, but it looks like I can get it in. Okay, now that one's just going to sort of, for the most part, stay in place. And we'll take the next piece of lead, get the first angle right, which would be like that. Push down through, set that in.
You make it look so easy.
Wow.
Years and years
Just
and
a mere,
years.
yeah, a mere, what years? A mere 23 years later,
Yeah.
it's finally looking easy.
I can't help but notice all the nail holes in your workspace here
Yeah.
too. There's just thousands and thousands of nail holes.
So basically, that's how it's done. But really, all you have here now is an entirely loose window that's being pinned together on the edge with nails, and being pinned together along this edge with nails. But I do want to give a demonstration of the soldering, and hopefully my soldering iron's hot enough. So I'm just
I'm gonna
gonna
step out of your way.
take some flux. The solder will stick only to metal, and it won't stick to any of the glass. The flux it acts as a cleaning agent so that the solder will want to bond to the lead. Any little bits if I just tried to take the solder and the soldering iron and try to melt the solder here, the solder would not want to stick nice and fluidly to the solder joint just because there's little micro dirt particles.
So the flux is actually a cleaning agent, like you said.
Yeah.
It just cleans it all up before.
Yeah. So I'm really not worrying too much about getting any of the flux on the glass because the glass still has to go through the cementing process, which cleans it.
And it doesn't take a lot, I see, just a little bit of the flux.
Right. I think that's probably plenty. Hopefully this is hot enough. And I just take this little wire brush to clean off my tip. If it's not quite hot enough, we'll shut the camera off and start over again in 2 minutes. It's still a little cool. But you can see what it's basically doing is turning 2 pieces of lead into one now in that particular spot. And only on this side, it still needs to be soldered on the other side.
How hot is that soldering iron?
I really don't know.
Well, it says 65 over here, whatever that means.
Oh, that's a rheostat.
Oh, okay.
If I just plug this soldering iron into an outlet, it would heat up to its entire potential.
So,
That's a rheostat. It controls how much heat can come even to the soldering iron. So just by process of using it, I know where to turn the rheostat at. Because if this tip gets too hot, even once I have it at the correct temperature and I'm soldering, if I set it down for 5 minutes and come back, because I haven't been using it, I haven't been taking heat from it, and I would go to solder a joint, it would actually melt the lead. I'm trying to melt the solder only and not the lead.
And the solder is made up of lead?
Yeah, this is. It's
Yeah, so
60.
it's lead on lead.
Yeah, except this isn't pure lead and neither is this.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to show how to cement a window. This is the cement I'm using. It's a linseed oil-based putty, and it's actually, shockingly, scrubbed right over the window with no regard
Oh my God!
for what I'm trying to do is take this putty and force it underneath the leads, between the glass and the lead, on each side of each piece of lead, all the way around every single piece of glass, and then when it's done, it gets flipped over and done on the other side.
It smells good. Must be the linseed oil.
There's also paint thinner in there too.
Well, that's not what I'm liking. I think it's the linseed oil.
So,
And you don't have to worry about it scratching the glass.
no,
or
all that
anything?
paint is permanently fired on. So what I do is I just keep working in circular motions, focusing on one piece of glass at a time. I know it. See, most people don't even realize stained glass windows go through this step
Oh,
where
that's what I
you're
was just gonna
scrubbing
say.
mud all over them, essentially.
Don't even realize what the process is for the finished product, you know?
Well, as this putty sets up, because it's got linseed oil in it, it retains some of its moisture indefinitely. And also, this is originally how stained glass windows were built that were going to be the only protection between inside and outside.
Also with insulation.
Well, it's sort of like the rain would run down the lead and hit the linseed oil putty, and the linseed oil would resist the rain.
Oh.
And so that's how they actually waterproof the windows too.
Oh, cool.
And of course, as you know, the window was a little rattly.
Yeah.
Um,
And so this will stabilize the whole thing once you do both
yeah,
sides.
as the putty begins to set up, that actually makes the window more rigid too. And
Now, if you're doing the foil wrap kind of windows, you don't have to do this
no,
process,
because
right?
the copper foil wraps right up around the edge of the surface of glass, and then you lay all those wrapped pieces next to each other and you flood any gap with solder, so there just literally are no gaps.
Oh.
This might be referred to, this type of a window, as a flat panel. It's a leaded panel. And this is really the way stained glass windows have been built for centuries. It hasn't changed at all.
That's really neat, isn't it? That, I mean, that it has retained the exact way that it was done.
Yeah, I mean, there's new machines that come out every year where you may be able to program your design into the machine, and then lay each color of glass into the machine and have a computer system cut out your glass for you. The only problem with that is the labor to program an original piece just for one time. You're only going to build it once. It would just be easier to know how to make patterns and cut the glass
Yeah.
without it. So there's even a company that has that machine that still calls me for work because they get orders for one-of-a-kind windows, and their machine, the amount of time that it would take to program that
Isn't
window
worth it.
into the machine isn't worth it.
I remember when illustrations, well, I've been a librarian so long, I remember when illustrations weren't as gorgeous as they became. They became like pieces of artwork. And but then when they started making computer-generated illustrations for children's books, I was just appalled. It just took away the beauty of the picture book, and even I don't like them now. You can always tell a computer-generated piece of illustrated literature, and it just isn't the same for me.
Well, I'm not going to cement this whole thing, but I'm going to show you the next step. Any of the flat leads, these little thin leads here are considered round leads. And if you looked at the edge, you would see that the top and bottom has a rounded edge to it. A lot of times your skinny leads are round, but this outside piece of lead is flat. And that means that after I've pushed this cement under, I can actually take this tool and hold it a little bit at an angle and drag it. And what I've just done is push that lead down against the glass, and I've trapped the putty under it.
Oh, like when you're doing a window pane, when you're putting a new
Yeah,
pane
in fact, when
across.
when you
Yeah.
putty glaze a window pane in, you're using linseed oil-based putty usually.
Huh.
So that's that. Now, one of the next steps is is you try to take the brush and pick up any large amounts of excess of the putty, which I did kind of already try to do. I go around with a stick, and what I'm doing with this first step is just trying to pick up extra bits of putty. I could continue on to the next step without doing this, but I find that I really go through a lot of putty wasted if I don't come back and gather it. And so really you just see that I'm sort of creating a little ball on the end of this stick of putty, which I can just drop onto the brush. It doesn't have to be neat because this is not any sort of final cleaning. And mainly you can see it really does get trapped on all these little pieces like the wolf's eye. The wolf's face has a lot of small pieces in it.
So then you can recycle your putty.
Well, at least right
For-
now
for
I
this-
can.
yeah.
Yeah, from now on, anything left
You
on
have
the
to mix
window.
up a new batch for each window where it hardens, or?
Well, what I do is I pour water over the top of whatever I don't
Oh.
use,
Oh.
and that forms an air barrier.
And then you just pour the water off when you want to go back to
Yeah, if it sits there too long, some of the linseed oil leaches out of the cement, and oil weighing less than water flows to the top.
Mhm.
And then I might have to add a little more linseed oil back in. But yeah, there's different places that make this, but the company I bought this from, I can't now remember where it was. But I had to order 20 some gallons of it at a time, so. And I just opened a new bucket up today and I saw that it was still just as fresh as the day they made it. All right, I got most of it out of the way. I'm just going to focus in that corner there. Okay, the next step is putting whiting on, and whiting basically being like a chalk. Now that this putty's been worked in, my whole goal is to now get it off. The first part I want to get it off of is the lead. If I don't get it off this lead, it's going to harden over time and be really hard to get off. So I don't focus a lot on the glass, I just focus on rubbing these leads.
And that's just an abrasive agent to help you get it off? Is it?
Correct, and it also absorbs moisture like linseed oil.
Who knew? Who knew there were this many steps? Look at a beautiful piece of stained glass and never think about all of the work that goes into it. I mean, I thought about all the work that goes into it, but not this kind of work that goes into it, you know?
Well, this is actually the first step I was ever taught at the first stained glass studio I worked at. It's called cementing, and it's usually considered the lowest man on the totem pole job. So they gave me that first and taught me how to do it.
That's such an important step in the process, you know? I mean,
Yeah, and you could still break pieces at this point, like you saw when I pushed this down. If you're not really being conscious that you're going against glass, you could still snap a piece, and beginner cementers do that.
oh. Am I
Okay.
hearing a confession here?
Oh, well, I still break glass to this day. You
Oh
just
my
have to know
gosh.
you're working with glass and realize that's what happens. Okay, so that's at that step. Now I'm going to put a little bit more on. And I'm going to take this brush. Now my goal is to get it off of everything. So you'll see me scrubbing it on the glass, scrubbing it on the leads, and you'll see me from time to time angling it on each side of the lead. This is going to make a lot of dust. Normally I wear a dust mask, but we'll just keep going at this point. And you can see the color of the lead changing, turning dark.
Yeah.
That's just because it's being burnished, basically, with this brush.
What are the bristles on the brush? Are they
Natural.
just natural bristles?
Yeah. Probably some type of plant. But the goal of this is you can't really rush the step. You really do have to get all the excess cement off of this window. If it were to set up, it would be really difficult to get it off the glass.
Is there a time frame that you have to get it off? I mean, like, half an hour, an hour?
No, it depends on the weather and the mix of your cement. Sometimes you have up to a few days. Like normally after cementing a window, I like to have them set around the shop for a couple weeks just to let this putty, begin to set up. Okay, then I'm gonna go over here and grab this brush. I would just sort of brush most of the excess out of the way. I would take another stick, go back around. Now this is just to ensure that, so you see I'm still getting some dried putty bits. We just call this picking because you're basically picking out cement with the end of a oak stick. It could be any kind of stick, but an oak keeps the point, the tip sharpened longer.
I would never have guessed there was still that much left in there. It looked like it was clean.
There's actually several more pickings that get
really?
done. Yeah, once the other side is cemented, it will squeeze out cement back through this side.
Oh,
So you have to sort of go back through and pick it. And then after a few days, when the cement's starting to set up, you get the whole window out again and you take a metal dental pick. And I trace around it again. And
oh my God.
the next step is to vacuum up this dust. Normally I would have done the whole panel. I'm just showing you one area now, so we'll just leave that dust over there alone.
Well,
Okay, then the final step is sawdust. This again is going to absorb any linseed oil that's still on the glass, and then any of the element that's in this cement that's making it black, like lamp black, which is basically soot, or other colorings that is on the lead, gets pulled off and basically sanded off by using sand, or by using this sawdust.
Did you make your own sawdust, or did you buy sawdust?
I have people give me sawdust, and I
Whenever,
sometimes
yeah.
save it. What you'll notice when I do this, everything else has been done. I'm going to be using different strokes with the brush in order to get the lead the shiniest I can. And I've normally found that if I go this way on the window and then go that way and do strokes that are opposite of the stroke I did before, it tends to be shinier.
And I think, I can't help but think, because that's what my brain does, and the most obscure things is like, so when the first piece of stained glass was made, how did they figure out all this stuff that had to be done? I just, you know, it's like, I know it was probably trial and error, but...
Yeah, probably. Basically, you see, it's turning the color of hematite, like a dark gray metallic stone.
It's cool.
And that's usually the color I'm going for, is a hematite color, a dark gray, shiny surface. And you can see over here, you see the solder versus the lead. But as you begin this process, you almost don't see the difference where the solder edges are and where the lead edges are.
Plus it like blends more into the, so you see the glass more than you see the
Right.
leading.
Well, right. Well, right now we're seeing the leading because no light's coming through the window.
Well, yeah, but yeah.
But you're right, once the window's up in the window, because this is now dark and not shiny, you're getting less reflection off of it.
Mm-hmm.
Your eye really does go right to the glass and sort of ignores the lead.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, hi, we're back in John Sheffer's studio, Glass Factor, and the windows are complete. This is Little Red Riding Hood, and they're about ready for installation, right, John?
A couple days.
Yeah. Can you tell us just about the frame a little bit?
Yeah, they're set into an oak frame that's been stained dark. And when they're installed, there's going to be some hooks installed on the edge of the frame and installed up into the top of the window sash. They're going to be hung on the interior side inside the library. So they'll be hung a few inches away from the regular window.
And I can't wait. And that's going to happen tomorrow morning, installation.
Friday.
So we will be filming installation a little bit tomorrow, and that's just about going to wrap up this whole session of library line in the stained glass windows in John Sheffer.
Yeah.
I'm going to cry.
Would you like the other one held up?
Sure,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm going to go set this one over here. Made more of a shadow because, in fact, I went back into most everything because it just wasn't three-dimensional enough.
Oh my gosh, it's so cool. John's here at the library today. He is installing the windows. It's very exciting. I can hardly wait to see them up. We're going to cover them with blackout cloths though until Wednesday, February 26th, which is our unveiling from 5:30 to 6:30, which is also National Fairy Tale Day. We'll all be dressed as characters from fairy tales, and it's going to be very exciting.
I go to the air, I
Wow, Miss
I think I'm stuck.
Okay, anybody else have a costume? All right, I think these are our costumes. Oh, it's pretty obvious. Can you tell us what your first name is? Grace. And Grace, what are you dressed up like? Little Red Riding Hood. Beautiful job, Grace. And who's standing next to Grace? Marla. And Marla, let Marla talk and then you'll have your turn. Marla, who are you dressed up like? Cinderella. Now, who's standing next to Marla? Mary. And who are you dressed up as, Mary? Oh, you better watch out because I am the wicked. Yeah, from Sleeping Beauty. Oh, and who's next to Mary? What's your name? Tell everybody your name. Anna. And who are you dressed up as, Anna? Princess Elsa. Princess Elsa. And who's next to Anna? Kelsey, and who are you dressed up as? One of the bears from Goldilocks. And who's next to one of the bears? Travis, and who are you dressed up as? Spooky thing in the forest. And who's next to Travis? Persea, who are you dressed up as? I know. Dorothy. Oh, and I know who you are too. Who's next to Persea? Kylie, who are you dressed up as? A mermaid. Okay, is that everyone? Is there anybody else in costume that we didn't get? All right, judges, you are to look at all of our contestants, and we're going to give out a prize for the best costume. Princess and the Pea, could you bring over Goldilocks and the doll? It's right behind you, and the book. Not Goldilocks. Oh, sure. Yeah, Goldilocks would be good, and the book. And the prize.
If anyone hasn't seen what I had to sleep on last night, I didn't sleep awake.
And that must be the pea from the Valley of the Jolly Ho 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 Giant.
So, this is what you could win.
This is a topsy-turvy doll. It has Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and Baby Bear is a little finger puppet. And on the other side is...
Oh, there she is.
Goldilocks. So you can tell the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And also the book that goes with that is Goldilocks and the Three Bears. That's by Jim Ellsworth. Which Pam and I actually met and had drinks with Jim Ellsworth. We don't want to do any name dropping around here, but we did.
He's a friend of ours.
I know. All
right,
so that's what one of you is going to win that. I wonder who it's going to be.
I don't know.
Have the judges come to a conclusion? You have. Who would like to make the announcement?
We think the person who stood out so quickly to us was Dorothy and Toto.
Dorothy and Toto. Yay! Say it, come on out here. Congratulations. You win the topsy-turvy doll and the book. Let's give a big hand. Now, Princess and the Pea, would you hand out to everybody else?
Nobody walks away without something.
And we know that Travis is going to be thrilled with his prize. It's My Pretty Pony.
Oh, yeah.
My Little Pony put a coloring book.
And as long as we're doing prizes, I think we'll get them out of the way. Does everybody have a ticket?
Yeah.
Ready to do the mixing and turning and choosing? Wait a minute, I gotta give out
We don't get my
Get your tickets out.
Anybody can win this one. Anybody.
I think, Snow White, could you come forward, please? I would love for you to choose. Her next job will be at Disney World.
No, I'm not leaving the library.
Yay! Who can to have this kind of fun at their job.
Okay.
Librarians!
Okay.
All listen.
All right. Last three numbers.
Everybody get quiet.
Oh, wait. She
Oh,
has
wait.
more to put
Oh,
in.
no. We
Oh,
gotta
we gotta do it again.
go. No, you
Maybe-
can't do it again.
You can't do it again? Okay.
Well, you know what? Here. They win a book. You've already chosen that one. That would not be fair to that
Stick 'em in
one.
then?
You did win something. There you go.
There we go. Okay. Are they all in? Okay. The last three digits is 584.
584. I will use my big and powerful wicked witch voice. Right here. Who won it? Who won it? Yay! Fabulous library users. I guess I'm just going to say a few words before we unveil the windows. I think I've told this story a million times, but when I first walked into this library in 1998 and I saw the beautiful stained glass windows, I had a dream, and it was to see this library have as many stained glass windows as it possibly could. And my dream was for us to become the stained glass library in America. When Debbie Zingaro, our former director, retired, we all went together and we bought a panel of the irises over there in honor of her time that she was a director. That was the first one that we added. When my mother passed away in September of 2013, we got quite a few donations in her honor here at the library. And we were discussing what we should do with them, and I knew that I wanted to add some stained glass windows to this library. I wanted an artist who was a stained glass artist, not a crafter. I didn't know anybody. I wanted that artist to be local. I didn't know anybody. One of my best friends, I was talking to her about it. She said, I cut a advertisement out of the newspaper about a year ago. There's a stained glass artist in West Springfield. She gave me that cutout, and he is John Sheffer. He owns Glass Factor. He lives in West Springfield. He lived in New York City for a long time. He had his own business, and he is almost a master stained glass artisan. I contacted him, and right away he and I just had a connection. He brought me the first artwork. I told him I wanted it to look like illustrations. I told him I wanted it to be Goldilocks and the Three Bears and Little Red Riding Hood. I thought they were timeless fairy tales. And in the immortal words of Albert Einstein, if you want your child to be intelligent, read him fairy tales. If you want him to be more intelligent, read him more fairy tales. And I wanted that to be kind of my legacy here, I guess, when I leave. And so, without further ado, in honor of my mother, Martha W. Catro, we're going to unveil the windows. That's Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I wanted them to look like illustrations in a book, and John right away knew what I wanted. This is a special type of reverse painting on glass where you put the black paint on and then you pull it off with a dry brush. He fired some of these pieces 4 and 5 times to get the shadows and the contours that he wanted in them. If you come back in the daylight, you can't believe when the sun is shining through that red cape. It's amazing. It's better for taking pictures actually at night. In each panel, he has hidden a word in Finn to commemorate my mom. One is Mumma, and the other is Sister.
It's beautiful stuff.
Mumma means grandmother, and Sesame chutzpah. And my mother certainly had chutzpah. Thank you.
We're going to try this Little Red Riding Hood. We never did it before, so.
This is my request.
Ow!
Sid.
Who's that I see walking in these woods? Why, it's Little Red Riding Hood. See there, Little Red Riding Hood. You sure are looking good. You're everything big bad wolves could want. Listen to me, Little Red Riding Hood. I don't think little big girls should go walking in the spooky old woods alone. Ow! What big eyes you have, the kind of eyes that would drive wolves mad. Just to see that you don't get chased, I think you ought to walk with me for a while. What cool lips you have, the kind of lure someone back. Till you get to Grandma's place, I think you ought to walk with me and be safe. Gonna keep my sheep suit on till I'm sure that you've been shown you can be trusted walking with you alone. Ow! Little Red Riding Hood, I'd like to hold you if I could, but you might think I'm a big bad wolf, so I won't. Ow!
Everybody. Oh.
What a big heart I have, the better to love you with. Little Red Riding Hood, even bad wolves can be good. I try to be satisfied just to walk close by your side. Before we get to Grandma's place, I think you ought to walk with me and be safe. Little Red Riding Hood, you sure are looking